Ariane, working with somebody as stylish as Tom Ford, is that intimidating on a film like Nocturnal Animals?
Stylish in terms of his personal style. Well, he wears a suit to work every day. a- As he does, he sets the bar really high.
Right. Well, you've worked with him before on A Single Man, so talk about going from that film to this film. I mean, it's very different in tone, but marked
You
by
think
an
so? You think
unmistakable
it's
style.
different?
Well, I mean, in terms of some of the content, I think it's very different. I
Yeah, the
mean,
content's very different. In terms of Tom's abilities as a director, the difference or the difference of the content?
of the content, I didn't mean in his abilities. I meant as in, it's
Okay.
very different kind of story and different kind of movie.
Yeah, they are different stories, but there are themes that
Mhm.
are like, for instance, Nocturnal Animals for me is about this very compelling central female character played by Amy Adams, Susan, who has kind of reached a point in her life where she's attained extreme success and outwardly, all the trappings of a successful life, a career, the big house, stature, status, husband. But on the inside, she's fraught with turmoil and this tumultuous dissatisfaction with an unhappy marriage, probably heading towards a midlife crisis, and regret. And, she goes on this journey in the film, reflecting on her youth and her first marriage and the tragedy that ensued that ended that relationship. And I think those kind of themes about isolation and alienation and self-reflection, though the circumstances are very different, Susan's character is not completely unlike George Falconer in A Single Man, about a man who's experienced incredible loss and who also has this veneer and exterior that is almost like a facade to the pain of his interior life. And there are similar ages. So I really was struck by that in Nocturnal Animals, I guess maybe because these characters are of a similar age to myself. So I could relate to that. And but of course the circumstances are extremely different, and with Nocturnal Animals comes a very complicated and I would say masterful script that Tom has created, adapting from the novel, this ability to move seamlessly through three worlds, through the contemporary world in Los Angeles, Susan's world, then going into her flashbacks in her youth, and then this narrative world of Nocturnal Animals, the novel. So, a very brave challenge Tom took on, I would say, and was really on page so beautifully written. Most of the time when I read scripts, it's a lot of technical information, camera moves, and a lot of technical description. Tom's scripts read almost like plays, where they're both A Single Man and Nocturnal Animals, where you have all this wonderful character development on the page and a lot of location description, which is really created like an emotional context the first time I read the script, and to his credit. So for me, I was kind of hooked from the get-go.
Yes, it gives you a lot to work with too as a designer, I'm sure, because you do have these three different worlds, and they're vastly different worlds. You've got the New York
Absolutely.
chic and rugged Texas. So talk about designing clothes for these characters. What were your ideas?
Well, there were challenges just in terms of keeping the three worlds separate yet seamless, which sounds like contradictory. But that really I have to credit Tom's direction. I mean, one thing that I can say confidently is that working with Tom can kind of fall into the confidence that, number one, the work is going to be beautifully photographed, which is fantastic for a costume designer. The character development is incredibly thoughtful and moves with the story. So that part, the trust part, is kind of built into working with Tom. I really trust him, his storytelling abilities, and of course his aesthetic language, which is unto itself. The challenges are, I think, always just, for me, contemporary film is so challenging to tell a contemporary story, because for me, I don't want, I often want the clothes, well, the idea of costumes is to inform the character and to move the story along and help create tone and texture and mood, oftentimes subtle costume clues that help, visual clues, but also at the same time, I think it's my responsibility to give a tactile experience for the actors, so that, like, if you can imagine that when an actor like Aaron Taylor Johnson puts on those green cowboy boots, that he can get the swagger and the bravado of what that brings to him. I've quoted it many times, but early on in my youth, I read a quote from Laurence Olivier that said he accessed his character from the shoes up, and he really didn't know who his character was till he got the shoes. And I kind of have taken that as a mantra in my career, not just with shoes, but with how actors relate to costumes and how they can be almost like they can catapult them to a time and a place. And that my responsibility as costume designer is also to help actors aesthetically access their characters. Now, not all actors use that process, but certain actors do. So costumes kind of, they have to work on, I think good costumes work on more than one level. They work on a visual level, of course, telling the story, and then also as a physical aid to help actors get there, basically.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what you were talking about earlier, in terms of Amy Adams' character's isolation, you really do get that in the clothing that she's wearing. And I thought it was, at least I got sort of a progression in style for her. Was that an intention on yours? Or?
Well, I think, we use a lot of neutrals, and initially you meet her in this very, excuse me, this very dramatic, powerful black silhouette in the gallery, and she's kind of alone after this gallery opening. And, it's a white room, and she's wearing black, is very stark in contrast, almost Kubrickian. And then that kind of sets the tone for her character. We do see the private side of Susan at home when she's reading the novel, and it's a bit more relaxed. But then in terms of who she is, like we see her at LACMA, and we also see, this kind of how she's so presentational, how she wants the world to perceive her when, she's a mess inside of what's going on in her personal life, and yet she's completely, the perception is that she has it all together.
Right. Yeah. I guess I was thinking about, the movie is fragmented, of course, so it doesn't follow in a straight line, but who she is, I guess, at the beginning of her life and who she's
Oh, yeah, for
become.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the flashbacks give us an opportunity to see the hopeful young woman, and we get a window into the complicated relationship she has with her mother. And the lines in the movie, we become our mothers, and we see her on that journey from this kind of young woman and all the optimism and hopefulness that comes with being young. And we see her kind of manifest her worst nightmare, which would be becoming her mother, which is that kind of overly perfect, uh, version of herself.
Right. And in terms of Gyllenhaal's character or characters, we should say, I mean, it's interesting because I mean they have like the real life person, I guess, in the reality of Amy Adams's world, and then you have the character that he plays in the book that she's reading, and it's a manifestation of her thinking about her ex-husband. I mean, can you talk a little bit about designing for those two different characters?
Yeah. uh, Jake really had a lot to, a big challenge with these two characters who are kind of one and the same, but not really. Um, the manifestation of the man that she married, who's kind of characterized in the story Nocturnal Animals. So, we had Tom directed us, the creative team, Seamus McGarvey, the cinematographer, Shane Valentino, the production designer. We had reference for these three different worlds: the contemporary world, the flashback world, and the West Texas world of Nocturnal Animals. So we had kind of a visual reference of how we wanted those, or how Tom wanted those worlds to look, and what those worlds meant to him. And in I think Jake's character was kind of the most challenging costume wise, because he's really the everyman. He is, I think the audience is, especially with Tony in the Nocturnal Animals script, we are experiencing this story through kind of his trauma and tragedy, and it's imperative that we feel empathy for him and this experience. So there are certain signifiers we used in Nocturnal Animals. In that part of the story, we used a lot of red signifiers, and we also used them in the contemporary world as well. Actually, we used them in all three worlds, that kind of brought the worlds together. And I think it was challenging, just in order. Sometimes costumes' job is to be quiet, and I think that both Tony and Edward, the costumes were quiet, and I think that they needed to feel like we needed to know and have empathy for this character. The red plaid shirt that he wears in the Nocturnal Animals world is really about a color signifier and a cinematic language in this kind of dusty brown world of West Texas. And that was like a device, using red as a device cinematically to kind of tie the stories together, and also to create photographic, photogenic language.
Mm-hmm. Well, you certainly pulled it off. Thank you so much. I know that you've got to get going. They only gave us a little bit of time here, but it was certainly a pleasure picking your brain.
Likewise. I love Gold Derby. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.